Welcome, everyone. This is Trey Jadlow on this Saturday on the 31st of October, Halloween 2015. And I'm here with my friend Bert Poole. This is actually our first time meeting. We had a conversation earlier in this week regarding a post that Mr. Gavagai placed regarding an interview done on The Thinking Atheist with Peter Boghossian and what was that other fellow's name? It was Anthony Magnabosco. Okay, great. Never heard of him. And I'm not actually that familiar with The Thinking Atheist either. Seems like a really articulate guy, probably a great program. But before we get going, I'd like to get to know you a little bit, Bert, if you wouldn't mind. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and I can give a brief description of my life as well, if you'd like. And I'm glad. Thank you for coming here and engaging with me. I very much appreciate that. And I think we probably will get along quite well.
Yeah, I think so too. So my background is I'm currently a CG supervisor at DreamWorks Animation. I have been there for about 20 years this next year.
Wow.
I was raised Catholic, and I was an altar boy in the Northeast. And when I went off to college, probably went to church the first, I'd say 2 to 3 months. And I had a roommate who was a bit of he liked a little bit of everything in his religion. So he was trying every Eastern religion I had never heard of in the podunk town that I grew up in. And so he got me I'd never subscribed to what he got into. I looked into it a little bit and wasn't quite convinced by that, but it certainly raised in me an awareness that I hadn't really thought about this stuff quite as much as I should have. I'd kind of, to use Ozzy's phrase, I drank in my beliefs with my mother's milk, and had them kind of worked into me, but hadn't really had the foundational reasoning behind it and the structure that I would need to retain it. And so that led me to a kind of a couple of month questioning of, look at God, if you're really the God of the Catholic Church, give me something. Let me know this, and I'll dig in. But I need I need you to kind of meet me here, because I'm not really feeling it right now. And it was at that point I went home for Christmas break, and then I came back and I got into a dorm Bible study in my school. And that was like nothing I had ever seen before. So I didn't have the exposure of studying the Bible. I hadn't really dug into it. Even though I'd been an altar boy, I probably could tell you about 3 things about Christianity. It was a different thing for me and my family, and my relationship to it was very different. And I became, for lack of a better term, born again at that point. Went to back to my dorm room, really prayed about it, was really moved by what I'd heard, and my life changed on a dime. I was very excited about what I discovered. I'm an all or none type of guy. So I don't do anything. I can't do anything in moderation. I kind of go through my life in these spurts of high activity and things, and then I move on to something else. But in this case, it ended up being about 10 years. And I got to the point where probably by year 2, I was starting to do Bible studies with other people. At one point, probably, junior or senior year in school, I was probably doing about 10 Bible studies a week with individuals. In terms of my doing student ministry, essentially. I met my wife through that Bible study. She was going to school as well, and we both ministered to students together. We would do work. There were a couple of universities in our area, so we would reach out to students at different places. Our church was very much a university church, and everybody lived within a small area of each other, and they did neighborhood work, and it was a really great experience. It was very rich and fulfilling. I have a lot of fond memories. I'm not a resentful Christian who looks back, with a lot of anger or anything. I would say probably my sophomore year, my second year, was when I made a turn to Calvinism. So I started reading Spurgeon's sermons, his Sovereign Grace sermons, really drank that in, and was pretty convinced by it, pretty compelled. I had a lot of other individuals that I read. I never got into R.C. Sproul. I know you're a big R.C. Sproul guy. I never found him really. It wasn't that I didn't like him. It just didn't ever cross my path.
How about John Piper? You were probably in John Piper, weren't you?
John Piper, yeah. I was into, I'd say, I think I read Will Durant's philosophies, history of philosophy, within that range. I was very open to some of the concepts and getting deeper into some of the philosophy behind it, and other philosophers. That's what I was saying by the Durant thing. But actually, since then, I kind of tabled it. Probably about 13 or 14 years ago, probably, maybe a little longer, I hit a point where I had questions that were nagging me that I realized were tricky. They were things that I didn't want to ignore, because I had to kind of decide whether I was going to pursue these questions and dig into them, because I was worried that I was leaning a direction I didn't care for. And there wasn't any tragedy that brought it up. There wasn't any, my marriage was fantastic. My kids are great. Everything's going wonderfully. But and it had to do mainly with human nature and behavior and what fundamental issues regarding to sin. And probably over 6 months really struggled with that stuff and dug into it, to the point where I was having ulcers and not ulcers, but like stomach aches at night when I couldn't sleep. It was really bothering me, and finally came to a point of rejecting belief. I kind of realized I no longer believed it anymore, and my wife confronted me one night, said, "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" I was a little hesitant to involve her in it, only in that I didn't want to worry her, and I didn't want to jeopardize other things in my life with where I was finding issue with myself, and so I think at that point, that was when I became an atheist, I think. So I've been an atheist since. I never went through an agnostic period. I would if I saw reason. I think that I had lost all of the reasons that I thought that there was a God. I didn't feel a need to find another faith or another manifestation. I was going to let that kind of come to me. So I was kind of pursuing the line of reasoning I was going down, and I was just going to let it take me where it took me. And that was away from Christianity, essentially. So it wasn't so much that I rejected a God belief. I just no longer had the God belief that I previously had. And since then, I've got more reasons in terms of why I'm an atheist, and more of reasons why I don't think a God exists. But at that time, I don't think I was nearly as well thought out. And so how I got to the Google Plus community is the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time on Facebook chatting with very close friends who many of them were some of those individuals who I knew back then. You see the length of my posts. Well, we have like monster 500 post threads that we just, we go back and forth. It's very enjoyable. It's very civil.
500 posts. I don't consider a success until we hit the million mark, or the 1,000 mark.
The million mark.
I meant no 1,000.
These aren't little quips. These are giant. Everybody's writing these giant. Okay. They're
I love those ones. I love it when you can have a long term. I haven't had one in a while, but I always celebrate when we hit the 1,000 post mark.
I find it much easier on Facebook, only in that my friends list is much more controlled. Yes. I'm not making public posts, whereas on Google Plus, because I like it being public and that other people can weigh in, but you get trolled right away, or you get people just coming in. I would step away for a couple of hours, and then my conversation's gone. All the goodwill I had is all gone. It's frustrating. Yeah. And so that's, I think that the probably through presuppositional apologetics coming through my friends is what led me to YouTube, just to looking into some of this stuff years ago. And that led me to, a lot of great individuals in the community who I then got involved with Google Plus, I'd say heavily this last spring, summer. But I had been watching the community for years, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So watching
Good.
the shows and the hangouts. So
well, excellent. That's a very very helpful background. Can you tell me about your family? So you're married, and on your picture, do you have 4 kids?
3 kids.
3 kids. So is it 2 boys and a girl?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And my middle boy's son, just so you know how deeply committed I was to Calvinism. My son's middle name is Spurgeon. So
excellent. Yeah, well, I love Spurgeon. That's great. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
All right. So what are the range and age of your children?
I have 2 in college and 1 about to go into college next year.
Okay, good. So you're almost done. Okay. Well, yeah. I think you probably know about me, but I'll just give a little bit of information that. I live in Kansas. I'm born and raised here. I became a Christian in 1986 in Northwest Arkansas at a youth missions organization called Youth with a Mission. You probably heard of them. Have you?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Okay. Yeah. That's where I became a Christian actually when I was going through the missionary training school they had when I was 20 years old. And then there I met my wife, and we were married in 1989. We came back up here to Kansas City, where I grew up. My wife's from San Francisco, and we jumped right in, and we're very much excited about the Kansas City prophetic movement. You ever heard of that?
No.
It was a big deal in the late 80s, early 90s. It's a kind of a cultic movement. It's called IHOP now, International House of Prayer. And the charismatic circles are really well known. So I was pretty much became a Christian in the charismatic circles. And then I moved from there to the Vineyard. You ever heard of the Vineyard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, a lot of my friends, half of us went to one church and the other half went to the Vineyard. So
okay, yeah. All right. So, well, Kansas City Fellowship was very closely affiliated with the Vineyard, especially in the early 90s. John Wimber, I won't go into all of it, but anyway, there's a close affiliation. And, the shenanigans got to be too much at the prophetic movement. I said enough. And then I went to a Vineyard, and it was just more of the same, and there's no content really there. Finally, I said enough. I said, I'm leaving. We're good. We're done. And then I went to a Bible church, and I found it much more refreshing. And anyway, and so my wife and I had 6 children. They range in age from 25, as my oldest boy is 25, and my youngest boy is 12. I have 3 boys and 3 girls. And sadly, my wife left me. Well, the divorce was final about a year ago. We were married for 25 years. And so, yeah, that was unfortunate. Very difficult time in my life, although I'm very happy right now, although I wish things were otherwise. But anyway, I'm doing very well. But and as you know, I think I'm a dental technician. I make teeth for a living.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Don't have a lot of formal education. I went through a little bit of junior college and then went to KU for a semester and flunked out. And I'm not naturally inclined toward intelligence. However, I see some similarities in personality. Would you consider yourself the type of person that has a personality that you're like this and not like this?
What, up and down, you're saying?
Yeah.
I tend to think of myself as fairly up. So
But I mean, do you have highs and lows?
You're talking about like high activity, or are you talking about like emotionally low?
Emotionally. I don't want to say unstable. Emotionally. That's how I am. Because you said you're all or nothing. That's me too. I said I got 2 warp 7 and stone cold 0. If I like something, I just get really excited about it. And I noticed on your page you said something like jack of all, master of none. That's what I say about myself too.
Yeah.
It's like I like to kind of do everything, and I'm just kind of but anyway, I'm very analytic though, analytical in the way I look at things, and if I like something, I'm 100%. If I don't like it, I just have no interest in it. So if I find a subject that's very fascinating to me, like the subject of ultimate issues, I find to be utterly fascinating. Even though it takes me forever to learn this stuff, I have this drive to just listen over and over. I'm an auditory learner, and I'll listen to things over and over. I work alone. One of the reasons I work alone is so I can listen to stuff all day long. I love just listening and interacting, jumping in and out throughout the day and at work. It's very enjoyable for me.
You and I are very much the like mind there in terms of just taking this stuff in, it's a lot of work, right? And so it's if you're not formally educated in it, where you actually got to devote time to it, catching up with those individuals, it's impossible, right? So how is it? I've been curious, because you come across to me as an intelligent guy who's well articulated. You've clearly done a lot of studying and a lot of work, and you've applied yourself greatly to these issues, because you actually, I feel like you have, for a layman, you have a pretty good breadth of things you've exposed yourself to a reasonable depth. Why did you not do so well in school? What was the...
I'm just a weird duck. I don't know if I could pass college even now. And like I said, if something interests me, you know, I'm all over it. If it doesn't interest me, I can't make myself do it. I mean, there's certain classes if I'd taken college, like statistics or something, I couldn't do it. It's funny because, you know, most people who are rationally oriented are very much into mathematics, and I hate math. And there's certain things that I just don't, I have no desire to want to do. I think I take after my grandfather's side, my mom's dad's side. They were just kind of odd people, but they were very likable and very much, what do you call it? Just, they would cobble things together. They could do it. My grandfather could do anything. He wasn't super good at anything, but he could do anything. I mean, and he would do things differently. They were just different people. And I think atheists oftentimes are very different people. A lot of times they're real artsy too. And I kind of have those kind of qualities within me. And I have a very dry sense of humor, as you can see. You know, when I interact in typing, I'm very sharp and cutting. And then by no means do I ever mean to be rude, but I love dry humor. I love making jokes. And I know that atheists do like that too. And that's why I kind of get along with this crowd quite well, I feel, and enjoy hanging out with those people. So where were we going with this? I forgot.
We were just filling in our backgrounds there. But in terms of your schooling and whether you...
Oh, you were asking me about my schooling. Yeah. So I'm just the kind of guy that, here's the thing about me. I'm gonna challenge you to think about some things that you never thought about before in a way you never thought about it before. And then you're gonna say something to me that everybody understands is real simple, and I'm gonna give you a blank stare. Because I don't know. I don't know the regular stuff that everybody else knows, but I know these weird things. And I've always been attracted to those areas which are not well investigated. Somehow I find that attractive, and I want to learn about those things. You know, when I first became a Christian, I started out, I wanted to read the Old Testament because nobody cares about the Old Testament, and just it's just my personality. I just like looking at things that nobody else wants to look at, or nobody else is inclined to look at. Somehow I think, oh well, nobody's doing that, I better do it, and I want to run over and do that. So it's just kind of my personality.
One more note was that you had mentioned that that there was that movement in the late 80s, early 90s, the charismatic movement you're referring to.
Yes.
The church that I arrived at was, I started going there in 92, and they were just coming out of a phase similar to that. And they were a Bible church, and had your description of why you weren't interested in Vineyard versus the Bible church is very similar to where I landed, where I feel like I was getting a much deeper experience in terms of knowledge and in terms of understanding in that church. So, yeah. Yeah,
I just, if you look at my Facebook page, I posted a thing on, what's that church called? Elevate Church with, what's his name? Stephen Furtick. And I'm just like, I feel like the reason that America is such a mess, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, is because of those, I'm going to use a word my daughter told me I got to stop using, and I'm trying not to use anymore, those stupid, happy-clappy churches that want to dumb everything down. They want to teach people not to think analytically. They say theology divides, Christ unites, and let's just focus on the gospel. And there is an element of benefit to that. That's kind of the thing. I was saved in that environment, and I had very fond memories of my salvation when my early years was just a pleasure. But overall, I left the charismatic movement for a lack of depth and the plethora of dishonest people within the movement. I remember my mom was a charismatic Presbyterian, and my mom would get Charisma magazine. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but okay. And I would read that. And when I first became a Christian, I was fascinated. I was just trying to take in as much as I could, and I'd read it every month. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I started looking at it. I thought, I'm looking at the ads in the back with the prayer cloths and the shenanigans and all that. And I thought, I don't want to be like these people. And the more and more I just took it in, they were just, people think they're doing God a favor by lying about it. And I thought, why would you think that you are doing God a favor? And really what they're about is getting your name in Hollywood lights. Essentially, I think that's what those people want. They want to have the front row seat of the marquee and say, look at me, I'm special because I hear from God or have something like that. And they're liars. And I thought, how really wicked that is to do it. And so that's why I left the charismatic movement. And I haven't looked back. I have a lot of charismatic friends and a lot of wonderful Christian charismatic friends, but that movement in and of itself, I think, is very weak. And so when I say, I don't want to say the whole charismatic broad blanket, but I talk this movement like Joel Osteen, and I even play Stephen Furtick, and I'll even place Rick Warren somewhat to that degree, and with people who focus on the gospel, and that's it. In other words, I'm just going to get to heaven. It's not about getting to heaven. It's about knowing their creator and having an intimate relationship with him and loving him as the pleasure of our lives. And that comes with the mind. You got to start with the mind. Some of my friends will get mad at that. I'm not saying you start with rationalism. I'm saying that the Bible is rational truth. And we apply our minds at the foundation and worship with propositional truth. And I feel like this whole Peter Boghossian thing, which hopefully we'll get to in a minute, that's my whole problem, is it not with the methodology. I think the methodology is my methodology. I think it's wonderful. I love the Socratic method. That's what he's employing there. I think it's wonderful. But what's funny about it is Dr. Boghossian and what's the guy's name again?
Anthony Magnabosco.
Yeah, Anthony Magnabosco are who was it? Hogtie. I had a hangout 2 days ago with Hogtie Champ, and he was talking about how there's this big inflated belly of Christianity, and basically what's happening now with the internet is people are talking about things openly, and they're deflating that big belly of Christianity today. And I agree with that,
right?
Because, and this is exactly what Dr. Boghossian is doing. He's going up and asking these questions of people in a wonderful fashion that basically just says, well, can you tell me what you believe and why you believe it? And it just exposes the fact that these are all happy, clappy Christians, these kids and these young people in college who are Christians. And that's what I told Hogtie. I said, they've never been to church. They don't even know what church is. They've been to youth group, and they do the stupid games, and they got the goofball youth pastor. And I don't want to broad brush all of it, but I think it is pretty accurate. They got these immature, silly youth pastors that are more interested in having fun and drawing people in, and they never teach them the Word of God. They never teach them systematic theology or doctrine. These people have no idea what they're talking about. So you got guys like Dr. Boghossian who comes along and Mr. I'm going to get it, Magnabosco?
Yeah. Magnabosco, yeah.
They come along and they challenge people, and you think, wow, they got something to say. Yeah, they have something to say that you don't, to the Christians, you have nothing. And they're like, yeah, I guess I don't. But they themselves have no answers. This is my problem with atheism. It's exactly one half of a worldview. All it is a negation of a worldview. You cannot have, and now Ozzy has a wonderful point where he says that just because you don't have an answer does not mean that somebody's false answer is right. But everybody that makes the claim, some people say, I'm an atheist. Well, I'm not making any claims about anything, so I don't have a burden of proof. Oh, yes, they do. Everybody that makes a claim about reality has a burden of proof. And that means the atheist has a burden of proof. The problem is atheism, by definition, is only a negation of a certain quality, which is a reason for existence, which is God. And so they can say, well, there is no God, and there is no ultimate reason for existence. And then you have to give a justification to demonstrate that there is some coherence to reality. And as of yet, I haven't found anybody. So here we've got, well, let me finish real quick. So we've got Christians that don't know anything, and we've got atheists that that claim to know something, and on face they may know something, and they deflate the Christians. And then I want to come behind the atheists and say, well, you guys don't have it either. And that's what I want to challenge. And I want to continue the Socratic conversation and talk about these things.
Sure. Let's table that last bit. I want to come back to, because I was right there with you in terms of atheists having a burden, which I agree. If you're going to make a claim, you have to have reasons for your claim that you can articulate to be considered persuasive or rational. In terms of dropping you off at the door without an answer. Let's talk about that after we get past the apologetics and whether the nature of Peter B. and Anthony's. I'm going to use shorthand here for them.
Sure,
so
that's
Peter
fine.
and Anthony.
Peter and Anthony.
Yeah. So Peter and Anthony have I don't actually. I've seen some of Peter's lectures. I haven't read any of his books. I've actually probably been more exposed to Anthony. So he has a really great street epistemology channel. And the thing that I think, what I would say is that in terms of seeing him act and him work, is that I would agree with you in that he's bringing people who don't have the foundation they should have to have the beliefs. They have confidence without warrant, right? They don't know why they believe, right? So he is in bringing questions to them, and he asks questions like, he'll start off usually with like a 1 to 100 scale. How confident are you? And then he'll start asking them what contributes to your belief, essentially. What would you say is the main thing that compels you to have that level of confidence? And most of the time people will say something like 100% or 90%.
In a presuppositional way, in a way.
Yeah, he doesn't hit a lot of that.
But the Christians are kind of walking in that vein. I think I'm not a presuppositionalist. I see it as a big problem.
Yeah. So he'll I don't want to put this the wrong way, but he essentially lets them dig their own grave, essentially, or hang themselves with their own rope, right? And I don't think I actually think he's fairly sincere in that he'll usually have he'll have some reflection after the discussion that when he like live streams some of these now. He used to just record them, but now he actually live streams his interactions. So
he's the atheist, Ray Comfort.
Maybe. I think you might enjoy his tone. He's very careful to tell them, look, I want to let you give your answers, and I'm not trying to influence you or anything. He doesn't put words in their mouth. He's very careful not to. And I actually think what he's doing is fine. I think that the difficulty is, much like myself being susceptible to the Christians who are inviting me to Bible study, and I walk in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. Throw out my entire worldview. Let me take this one on. It just goes to show how little I had reasoned my own worldview, right? So I had reasoned it all. All right, I'm willing to chuck this all. This seems great. All right, what do I need to believe here, right? It doesn't. So I think he's a little bit playing to the same thing, only in that I think you're right in that he's not giving them. I might put it that maybe, I don't know if he articulates it this way, but the feeling I'm left with is what some of them walk away with the conclusion, I probably need to go find some better reasons to believe the things I believe, right? That's not necessarily his point. His point would be, maybe you shouldn't believe this at all. You don't have reasons. I think a lot of them walk away, because he'll see them again later. And I think some of them are, I had to go back and kind of reevaluate so that I could believe this, right? And that's, if you end up, there's nothing inherently that's a weird way to go about it. But if you come by reasons that you're persuaded by, the fact that it was ad hoc, you should probably be a little suspicious, but I don't think there's anything. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't come to the right belief were you to go back and look into it, right? To try to go and justify what it is you want to believe, essentially. So anyway, I think his I can't speak for Peter, but for Anthony, I think he actually does a pretty good job of keeping himself out of suggesting things to them. What I would say is that if, when my kids went off to college, I wanted to make sure that they had good grounding to reason about things and not simply, they may not have realized this, but they were free to believe in God should they want to. And actually, my son said recently he wants to take a religious studies course in college as an elective. And I want them to have the right tools to to actually come by beliefs and form reasons or consider to form propositions and beliefs and to have those be justified and be critical of their own confidence in them, make sure that they have the appropriate confidence for what they could know about that. So so I'm sure that there are some parents who would probably watch this and see their kid responding to this guy and go, oh my gosh, this is terrible. My kid's not ready for that. But to some degree, that's why they're off at college and not living at home anymore, right?
And if they're not ready for it, then maybe we didn't do our jobs as parents. Because our job, let's see, I was talking to Hogtie about his little kids. You know, he has some small children, and we were talking about the issue that that we influence our children whether we want to or not. But I always hear atheists say that, oh, I don't influence my children either way. And I'm like, come on, man. I mean, we all do. And we all, whether we want to or not, we influence our children in the way that we believe reality is. But our job, though, especially as they get older and they get up to their teen years, is to teach them, hopefully to be able to give them the tools for rational inquiry and to look at evidence and to be willing to change your mind in view of the facts. The problem is not only are parents sheltering your children from the world they want them just to believe their world, they themselves are not very critical or thoughtful. R.C. Sproul says this all the time, and I totally agree with him. He says we're living in an age of almost the most irrational age in the history of mankind right now. That doesn't mean we're anti-intellectual, or I'm sorry, we're not anti-educational, we're not anti-technology. Those things are at an all-time high. But actually, through critical analysis and thinking about things thoughtfully, I think in the church, blind faith is considered to be virtuous, which is a travesty. But even in the world, and I see in some science world, you've got some crazy stuff going on where people are not thinking analytically. And this is why I am glad to see this kind of moving back to a philosophical, because what we did is we fell into scientific naturalism, which oftentimes repudiates philosophy, and they don't realize that they must go together. You've got philosophical presuppositions in order to filter the information of what you empirically understand. They're absolutely married, and we're very shallow. You see people like Richard Dawkins. I would even say Dr. Boghossian is on that same level. The whole new atheist movement, I find them to be not that intelligent. They know a lot of facts, but they're not deep thinkers at all. I listened to the book maybe a year ago or something on Dr. Boghossian's book, and I mean, I was kind of cracking up. It's partially the way he was reading it. I said, where did he get this sycophant to read his book? And I found out he was reading his own book. But he was so excited about it and stuff. Anyway, but the idea that our children need to be able to have thinking, have the tools to think and to get information is very important. And so why I see a lot of these people falling away at college and stuff, but their parents have just sheltered, the helicopter parents have sheltered their children all their lives, and they want them to believe, because that's the way they believe. It's called the modernist world. It's those people who hold to these moral standards. They don't really have a reason for it. It's just tradition. And right now we're seeing an absolute attack on tradition. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the foundation for the tradition is not rationally justified oftentimes. That doesn't mean that there's not a justification for it. The people just don't rationalize it. They don't have an understanding of it. And so I think what let's say Peter and Anthony's tactics can actually be a good thing, because the videos I saw, those people are like, whoa, I don't have a reason for what I believe. And of course, the goal for Anthony and his interactions is to get them to be skeptics. But what I hear with those people a lot of times, like you said, I need to check into what I believe. Is it really for real? And so, and the absolute antidote, I don't know what you would call that, to this whole problem is, like I said, the happy clappy church. The people they're just obnoxious. People that are, and they may be smart people, but when it comes to religion, they think that being they mistake childlike faith for childish faith, and it's pathetic. And I also I struggle with presuppositionalism too, because I think it also has this level the big thing I was telling Hogtie about this, we've got under Immanuel Kant, he was trying to bring a synthesis between empiricism and rationalism and put them together. And he had this idea. He said that everything that is every information that we have, we've got to be able to understand and be able to experience it. And so what he said is there are certain things that we cannot experience, and among those things are God, the essences of things. If I could look at the essence of this, this computer screen, this camera, I don't know what the essences are. I see the accidents, I see the outward qualities of it, but I really don't know what the essence of what it is. What is camera-ness? What is whatever? We can't see those essences, so we'll just put those in God and in ourself. We don't know what our self is either. We can't experience it necessarily directly. What exactly that essence is. So he put the self, God, and essences in this realm called the noumenal realm. And so what he did is he took reality and he moved it up like this, and he said, these things we cannot experience, therefore we cannot prove that they're true, but these things we really can. And so ever since then, we've had this it's Francis Schaeffer called it the two-story view of reality, where you got the lower level, which is the empirical, that which you can understand, those are facts. And then you've got the upper story here, which you've got the values or morals or whatever you have. And basically these are just the emotings, things that you feel are good and that you like. And reality can't really live like that consistently, because if in fact, killing human beings is part up here and it's not this part down here, then that's kind of a dangerous paradigm in which to build society on. So what my job is to do is I want to attack Immanuel Kant and say that this is on the same here. I want to bring these on the same level. In fact, you can experience God, and God is a veritable reality. And so, for example, when you say that God is on a scale of 1 to 100, how sure am I that God exists? I would have to say I can't say 100%, because as a contingent being, as somebody who's dependent for their existence, I can't have absolute certainty of anything. I've got to have faith. Bert Poole has to have faith. All of us have to exercise faith because we don't know for sure. What is a hypothesis? It's a faith statement. We're thinking, well, they could go this way. Let's check it out and let's try. And even when you verify it, you still cannot say you have 100% faith, because our senses trick us. However, when we're looking at the existence of God, if you give the two presuppositions or foundations of logic and sense perception, and we know that we ourselves are contingent beings, that we did not create ourselves before we existed, that we happen, the existence of God is of the highest caliber of certainty that you can possibly have. I know that God exists more than I know that I have my hand in front of my face right now, because it's an analytic reality. This is merely empirical. This is not an analytic reality, but causality is an analytic truth. Therefore, I know that God exists more than I know that anything exists. If anything I'm sure about, it's that, even though I can't be 100% on it. So that's what I've got. We've got to teach our kids to be thinking, thoughtful about that, and we're not thoughtful at all about that. I mean, in my interaction with the atheists, I've not found anybody to be particularly compelling with their argumentation at all up to this point.
Yeah, I think there's. I don't know that I'd agree with that. I'd say there's. You're going to get, similar to the Christian groups that I hang with and talk with, mm-hmm. You're going to get some who are thinking hard about this stuff and have really good fleshed out thinking behind it and reasons why they believe, and they can put up a defense of their arguments. And it's while I won't agree with it, I understand why it is they believe that. And then there's others who don't know how to start that discussion, right? And I think that you get that. I mean, I think I would agree with you on the new atheist movement. I think you get some who are really strong in certain areas, and they should not be speaking up in other areas. As someone who's familiar with scripture and theology, I'm a little embarrassed sometimes when I hear them trying to articulate what it is they think their interlocutor's position is, right? They're putting out a Christianity that no one believes, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would agree with you there, but there are some, I think, somebody like Matt Dillahunty, I actually think is really well-rounded, and part of that comes from having a depth in his own experience, similar to, I think it's similar to my experience, in that I had, while there's many Christians who would say I was never a Christian, I was certainly exposed to the arguments and understand the underlying theology and have a understanding of how the worldview operates. And so I think that's a really tall order to have anyone who hasn't gone through that experience to really have that knowledge. And I think people should be a little more reserved in what they're willing to speak to, how far they're willing to extend out beyond what their own, warranted, what their own experience warrants, essentially. So I would say that on the topic of kids going out, so it always bothered me, especially, my kids get in into their teen years. I tried at every point that I heard it where they were soliciting my opinion as to what they should think. I never let that fly. I would try to ask them first what they thought about it. And I think that's the way we have to operate. And I think that is the problem that some atheists would have with because of doctrinal issues and because of I think Scripture lays out a framework for you to adopt. You want to I think as a Christian, you want to have reasons why you adopt it. You want to have an understanding that's kind of throughout you. It's kind of something that permeates your belief, such that you're not simply adopting it because you read it or because you heard it on Sunday, but that you actually understand why it says that. And I think that there are a lot of individuals not giving that. It's your complaint, not giving that depth to those individuals, and so the atheist community, and I think part of it is that this probably has to do with the fact that atheists, a lot of them in the community, are former Christians who had weak faith or had who became disabused of it and became bitter or resentful back towards it. And so they look back and go, look at, you're just indoctrinating, right? I think atheists and skeptics and theists and deists and everybody else can be guilty of not challenging your kids enough to get there on their own, right? You have reasons you believe it, but they have to have those reasons for themselves. They can't. That's right. Can't take on your beliefs, right?
And I think that's so important. And this is the thing that I challenge myself, and I challenge not my kids, but all my atheist interlocutors. This is my big thing. You want to put something on my forehead? It's like, own your ideas. That's what we must do. And I'm not so worried about my kids being Christians, but I'm actually worried about my kids embracing Christ because they are convinced it's true, not because they are told, or not because I think it's true. I want them to be convinced of it. And in saying that, I'm not saying I'm saying that I could be wrong. I could be wrong about my views, and I want them to challenge me, and for me to have my faith challenged so that it's not true. I don't want it, because I'm not shilling for Christianity. I'm shilling for what I'm convinced is true. I really do think that it's true. And if it's not true, I don't want it. Why would you believe something that's not true? I don't understand that. So I see a lot of that in the atheist community and Christian community.
Yeah, it's similar. I've been saying a lot lately, and I'm not sure if I got this from someplace else but I've been saying to individuals that I find it the case that people want their beliefs to be right, not to have right beliefs, right? And so
that's a good maxim.
There was a moment. My daughter never watches these hangouts, so she's not gonna get upset with me about this, but she would if she watched this. But this summer we were in a museum in Germany. We went to Germany this summer for a couple weeks, and she was having an argument over. There was an evolutionary adaptation that she was arguing about. My wife, I don't know how they got on the subject. It was about height related to races, and I ended up actually siding with she came up to me, she kind of included me and said, hey, tell mom how this is. And I said, actually, I think your mother's right. And I just spoiled her, right? And she came up to me probably about 2 or 3 minutes later. I'm down the museum. She kind of walks up next to me and she kind of mutters, she goes, I just wanted to be right. Right. And that's a really tough position to be in. You have there's a desire for your beliefs to be right. And it's very difficult to find out that you're wrong. That's actually in the spirit of the post that I made that you said was hilarious, which it puzzled me because I actually was like, oh, I would have thought Trey would have agreed with that. The statement that started this all was about entering the discussion with a willingness to be wrong. That I have errors throughout my belief set, and this person could hold some revision for me if I walk in there guns blazing and put it off, or I take them in a way where it closes me off to that revision, all the worse for me, right? And I find that's kind of my difficulty in the Google Plus community is I feel like there are people who individuals are so put off by that they don't take them seriously anymore. And I think that's a bit of a mistake, only in that many of these individuals are putting forth arguments where when I engage them, so for instance, this has happened several times with Rational Theist Matt. So Matt Bell will post something, and because he is so unforgiving to my posts, he scrutinizes and picks them apart. I actually learn quite a bit in his responses. I start to find out, oh yeah, you know what, I'm off a little bit there. I need to think about that a little more, or he'll catch me, right? And so if you're only ever traveling in the circles where there's agreement, you're not butting up against anything that's going to really tell you anything, right? And I think that's actually something I'd like to see more in the atheist community, is more disagreement on issues and discussion about those issues. And I find that it tends to be that we end up talking about Christianity all the time instead of other issues. And when there are other issues, I find it really fruitful because you get individuals talking about morality. That discussion, Ozzy, JD, Hogtie, and Ward had a conversation about morality. And I really enjoyed that because JD and JD is not a moral realist, right, whereas Ozzy is. And so they had a discussion about two different flavors of morality that aren't the Christian manifestation. And I actually learned a lot about where the differences are and where I side and where I see it being. And it helps me to revise. So I guess my point in that post was that you should always enter dialogue interested in learning something, even if it's not something from your opponents or interlocutors. You're not taking on their position. It's through the scrutinizing of yours that you may learn something that you didn't quite see.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think Socrates said that, was it Socrates? Said that the first thing necessary to learning, the first step is to realize that you may be wrong, or admitting your ignorance. You can't, if you're not willing to admit your ignorance, you're not going to learn. And boy, we're living in a day right now where that seems like an all-time high in my life, where people are so confident about their views all around, and they're so dogmatic. We're seeing the right and the left, polarize in a significant way, and there's less and less dialogue, and it makes me concerned. But I want to disagree with you slightly on this, but I think you'll agree with me. There are a lot of people on Google Plus that don't deserve an audience, and so. A lot of people, I won't pay attention to them. But I also agree with you. I say that it's important for us, for people who disagree with us, that we have a lending ear and we are listening. One of the things I love about Google Plus and the fascination with the world in which we live today, with this thing where we can all have a hangout just like that. I can interact with somebody in Sweden or in Africa via Hangout. And what they do is the community is incredibly diverse. And I think that diversity brings enlightenment in many ways. Yeah. And we all have our little cultures, and we have these things that we believe. And you interact with somebody that's so much different. And your first thought is, that's really weird. And then when you get to know the person, you listen to them, you thought, that's profound. And the way that they even interact, I got a friend from Nigeria who's very dear to me. He's an atheist. He's an apostate Muslim. And and he's just we're really good friends, and his just the way African people are. Every culture's got their kind of different thing, and there's just something about them. He's so endearing to me in the way that he reacts to things. There's an innocence about him in the way that we interact, and he's a lot smarter. He's very, very, very intelligent. But that's just one example. But I'm always coming into contact with people that are very different to me, and I am amazed at their perspective and think, I didn't know that. And so we're living in an age where it's really, really cool, and we're really benefited and blessed to be able to interact with people with different ideas in a way that we couldn't. And so I'm a big fan of diversity, but diversity must be unified under a matrix. And this is my big thing. Trey is all about unity and diversity. We've got to have some kind of element or some kind of a coherence to all the unity, because all you have if you don't have it is chaos. The greatest question of Western philosophy has been that of unity and diversity. How do we make unity out of diversity? How does that work? And when I first heard R.C. Sproul talk about that, I had no idea what he was talking about it. And the more interactive now, it's just like, oh, my goodness, yes, that's it. Everything is unity and diversity. And I think we're moving into an age in the industrialized world, or Fox says the post-industrialized world, some of us are, that we are glorying in diversity without any coherent unity. And I say that the end result necessarily will be disintegration. That's what diversity without unity is. And you know that we go to university to make unity out of diversity. That's what it's for. We are the country called e pluribus unum, out of many, one. We have diversity with unity, but we're throwing off our unity and our meta-narrative that gives us that. And it's going to be just chaos. And it's going to be whoever has the strongest unity will subsume the diversity. And I worry about Western Europe. People think I'm an alarmist or something. Maybe I am, but I'm being honest with what I see there. I see Great Britain breaking up. I see the Western European states breaking up. They've lost their meta-narrative. They don't really know who they haven't had the definition. They're all fighting each other. And guess what? Islam has a very strong meta-narrative, and they're happy to step in and say, here, we'll take over. And they have a plan, and it's not a good one. And I worry about such things.
Yeah, I would agree with parts of that and disagree strongly with other parts. I think that I see it the other way. I think that the growing pains you see are of evidence of things that hadn't given yet, that we're bound to give. And I think that those things, to think about it like a fault line, you have some faults that give gradually. And I think we had a long time of like faults not actually giving gradually. You had things building up. And I think that what you're seeing now is you're seeing shifts, but I think it's inevitable movement. I think that you have where you're seeing disunity, I'm actually seeing unity. I'm seeing greater an increase of, I think that more ideas is fine. And I think that it's about nurturing discourse and allowing those conversations to take place. I actually think, I think Google Plus is a really good thing for this. I don't know that I want to see necessarily unity come out of it, although I think that there'll be a unity in the diversity. But that's those
you're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying, you're saying, yeah, the diversity is great and to talk about great. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying toward what goal? What is the goal toward this unity or this diversity that you have?
Well, there's a as human beings, there's a I don't want to get into the meta narrative talk because I have my own issues with some of where that leads. But I would say that if there's a coherence or there's a unifying principle in the types of beings we are, right? And so I think that there'll always be a little bit of stickiness there in terms of our
but what is it?
Shared imperatives. There are things about our nature that are common, and so I think that these disparate ideas can exist out there and find root in common shared goals that are very core to our existence.
Yes, but here's my problem. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would agree with you in that there are, for instance, there are militant Islamists who aren't thinking critically about that and whose beliefs actually override basic core principles within those imperatives that I'm not a fan of, that I don't want to see realized, and so we're going to have a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So I agree with you that there are those who aren't interested in the morality that I would be speaking of, or even some of the core concepts in terms of what is civil action or what is a right action at the most fundamental level that you and I could agree with in terms of taking lives and in terms of treatment of others, right? You and I can find common ground. A militant, a member of ISIS who has a very skewed view of the world, has a dangerous view of, has a perspective that's not compatible, can't live alongside mine. So we've got an issue. So I'm sorry,
Yeah,
you were going to say.
Well, you were saying you're all right. So you're saying there's such a thing as salvation, and we're all seeking salvation. I've been bringing this up a lot in my hangouts, that we're both seeking salvation. We're both seeking the glory of existence. And this is my problem with atheism, is that it has no reason for it. It's just an irrational emoting that they have. And to demonstrate, can we listen to a few excerpts from the interview with Dr. Boghossian and Anthony?
Sure. We can do that. I would. I disagree with some of that, but in the
right. Well, we can talk about it.
In the interest of staying on topic, we can talk about that another time, and we can stay on this topic.
So, oh, that's where I'm wanting to go, though. That's where this is my problem with Dr. Boghossian. Can you see? Do you see me on the screen, or do you see this thing I put up?
I can't see anything other than the.
Am I there? Are you looking at me?
Yeah, I can see you. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's not up then. All right, I've never done this before, so I'm trying to do it, and I tried to make a list with the different areas, and I don't know how else it's going to work, but let's go ahead and try it. I've never done a YouTube share before. Okay, can you hear that? Did you hear Dr. Boghossian say something?
Nope.
All right, hold on.
If you let it go longer, I'm not sure if it was a lag issue but I didn't hear anything.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and play the quote, and then we'll see if you heard it when it's done, okay? Here it goes.
Yeah, I don't hear it.
Can you hear it?
No, I didn't hear that. No, you muted, and I was able to tell that you were playing something, but it didn't come through in the audio.
All right, hold on. Let me see if I know if I can do this. I'm looking here to see. Do I have to do a screen share with this? Let's see. I think I have to do a screen share. Let's try this. Okay, can you see the?
Oh yes, I can see it now. Yep.
All right, let's see if this works here. Can you hear that?
I can't hear it. I can see your.
Well, I may not be able to do it because I don't know how to.
That's okay. If you want to, if it's a brief statement, you can just go ahead and I'll take your word for it that he's.
Well, I wanted to parse what he was saying specifically, and I can't really. I mean, we can talk about it, but hold on just a minute. Stop sharing. Go to Hangouts, just sharing your screen. Yes. Hold on. Let me just try just a sec here, see if I can figure this out. If anybody's watching this, can help me for the. Oh, here we go. Okay. I think it's working.
Oh, there you go. Present to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let me see if I can back this up just a tad. 38. Just a sec here. Okay. Can you hear that?
No.
Your screen sharing. Because I shouldn't have to screen share and YouTube to do everything. Anyway, I guess we won't. Darn. Okay, well, let me just talk about the topics that he spoke about. Let me get rid of this screen here so I can see you. Whoa! Stop that! Oh my goodness.
Okay, there we go.
Infinity. Okay. So the language, I thought, this is my problem with new atheism, is the language it is used, I find to be so amusing. And what they do is they speak with the moral imperative. In the first clip, he was talking about talking about people in an audience, and I think he was giving a presentation, and a woman said, "Oh, you're talking about atheism? Well, I'm going to get up and leave." And he said, "These are the people that we need to speak with."
It was Inspiring Doubt or something like that was the name of his.
Oh, okay. And she said, "That's what you're going to talk about." And she said,
right,
"Yeah."
Yes.
And
she had her daughter. She had her daughter with him, and he said, "This is the group that we need to be appealing to." Yeah.
Right. And so, so my question is, I want you to think about this. What is the need that Dr. Boghossian is appealing to that everybody is looking for?
I think that what I was going to say earlier, and I think this is along those lines, is you would want skeptical Christians, right? Wouldn't you? That if you had a doctrinal issue that someone was proposing, you would want people to scrutinize that and have adequate grounds for adopting it. You wouldn't want them simply taking, so you want them to have a skeptical attitude, right? You want, it's a little bit, I don't find the inspiring doubt notion to be off from what actually you've been saying in terms of not being so certain and being open to revision and having a certain disposition towards arguments that allows you to hear where you may need to learn something. Learning is essentially when you're wrong about something, right? You learn that you're wrong and you've taken on something else. That's how learning operates, right? And so we want people to have learning, a disposition for learning and thinking critically about positions and having their confidence scale with what's warranted, right? So I think that I have many problems throughout that interview with how he articulates things, and even potentially some of that I suspect is a difference of opinion between he and I in terms of what the goal should be. I don't think we should be making atheists. I think we should be encouraging people to think critically about their beliefs. I was talking about this with, I think, Christopher Mowdy yesterday in a little back and forth, in that he was talking about moderate atheism. And what he meant by that was not being, I don't want to put words in his mouth. The way that I see it is that I'm an atheist. I want individuals to have true beliefs, and I want to go through that journey with them. And that right now has me as a provisional atheist, where I have certain beliefs that lead me to think that God does not exist. But that doesn't make me an advocate for atheism per se. If my reasoning is solid and I have good arguments, I'm going to be arguing for atheism. But that's simply because I believe atheism is currently true. My current belief is that atheism is true, that no God exists. Right. So I'm not looking to make atheists. I'm looking to have conversations where I can interact and we can both get a little closer to what's actually the case. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hold on just a sec?
Sure.
I need to talk to my daughter for a second.
Sure.
Hold on. Let me. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, that's not really what I'm talking about, though.
Okay.
What you're doing is you're saying the methodology that you want is the same as methodology that I want, that you want people to be. All right. So, I did a hangout recently with Greg Bray, and Greg Bray is Inspiring Doubt. That's his podcast. And I asked him also, I said, what is your goal? Your goal is not doubt. This is something that the skeptical community, I don't think they're very thoughtful about. They always glory in skepticism. Never does anybody want to glory in skepticism. If you look throughout the history of philosophy, every time a society embraces skepticism, it degenerates. And you talk about the pre-Socratics there was an impasse between Heraclitus and Parmenides, who were talking about being and becoming. Is everything changing, or is everything just an essence that's not changing? If you don't have some kind of being that's not changing, you can't have a changing essence for a foundation. And they went back and forth. And is it about being, or is it about becoming? And they could not come to an agreement on this. And what happened is people began to doubt. And they said, well, I don't know if these smart guys can't figure it out. Why can't I figure it out? Let's stop worrying about ultimate issues. Let's just worry about eat, drink, and be merry. I want to fill my stomach today. And this is also the age of the sophists, where they had these teachers who are itinerant teachers who would go from town to town for a fee. They would teach people. And they began to degenerate with the skeptical ideas that were generated because of Heraclitus and Parmenides. And they were considered today like today's Madison Avenue ad men. All they cared about, the sophists, was not about Socrates just hated him. All we know about sophists is what Plato talked about Socrates saying, and he was very negative toward them. But basically, all they said is, truth does not matter, but what works for me. It's a modern pragmatism. Is stemmed from Heraclitus and the pre-Socratics there, and Socrates shows up on the scene and is very passionate about truth, beauty, and goodness. And he said, we need to start looking for what's true, not what just works for me. And he's been credited not only for saving the Greek culture to think about things metaphysically and think about big picture things, but he's also credited with saving possibly the entire Western world with his thinking. And we go through these cycles over and over and over. So skepticism is not the goal. Skepticism, you want certainty. You want to be skeptical so that you can gain certainty. Would you agree with that?
Well, let me, instead of agreeing or disagreeing with that, let me kind of lay out my case here. Is that I think that you can be irrational one of two ways. You can either be overconfident or underconfident in a belief, right? So you have warrant that you should believe something and you're not. That's irrational. You have warrant to believe something and to believe something to a degree, but you have more confidence than you should. That's irrational, right? So, in terms of skepticism is. I was having I was talking to my wife actually about this the other day on our walk. I see humans having a propensity to come to conclusions, to assign, I don't know if you've ever seen Michael Shermer's discussions about agency, and he basically says that there's he talks about type 1 errors, type 2 errors in terms of a false positive and a false negative, and that and not getting into his whole thing, his basic point is that we have a propensity for finding causation, for attributing without evidence or without enough evidence. We tend to believe things we shouldn't more often than not believing things we should.
Right.
Well, I guess that's a little funny to say it that way, but you hear a creak in the house, and your mind is instantly assumes agency. There's somebody there, or is there somebody there? Your first suspicion is that just you have this inclination essentially, and I think that skepticism is where that was valuable. And so this is we're going to disagree a little bit on this, in that I believe in evolution and in a development of traits that came out of survival situations and suitability for environment. But what I would say is that there was a time where this type of knee-jerk reaction was really beneficial. If Michael Shermer's point is, if you jump back from a bush and there's no snake there, you're going to live. And if there is a snake there, you're going to live potentially, because you're going to have to jump back. If you're going to exercise skepticism and stand there and wait for more evidence, in the case that the snake's not there, you're not going to get bit. But if the snake's there, you're going to get bit. So his point is that there's a propensity or there's a favored disposition towards believing and attributing causation and taking on propositions as and being confident in them. There's a benefit to being confident. I don't want my kids to go out into the world with half-hearted, flippant attitudes where they can flip-flop. Like, I want them to be stable. I want them, even if there are certain beliefs that maybe they don't have necessarily the solid ground they should, but I still want them to have those beliefs, because it's better than them thinking otherwise, right? Like, they haven't come to it themselves, but it doesn't mean that I don't want them to have that. And so the point would be that skepticism is where we can slow down and we can evaluate the warrant. And it's not meant to be hyper skepticism. It's not meant to be overly skeptical, but it is the setting aside confidence for a moment and provisionally taking on the position that you could be wrong about it, and evaluating from that point what basis you have for the belief, right? So I would agree with you in that if we're talking about the hedonists, or if we're talking about individuals who got tired of the status quo and said, wait, why do we believe this stuff? Let's chuck it and live for the day, right? I don't see that as exercising skepticism. I see that as a bastardization of it, or using skepticism to say, look at, we don't need this, but you're not being any more skeptical about your decision to go off and do what you want, right? You haven't weighed that at all, right? So,
so skepticism for you is not the end game. Skepticism is an instrument for you to gain an end. Is that correct?
I see it as a disposition, that you're adopting a certain stance in relation to propositions and evidence, and you're going to take your time when you can. Like I told my wife, there are times where I have to react really quickly and I have to make a decision. I don't have time to evaluate it.
Sure.
Then I got to do what I got to do. Right?
Why? But why do you do that?
Usually it's because there's a time factor, or there's something that I need to do. Right?
No,
like
I mean, whether you do it quickly or slowly, whatever, why do you do it? What's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of being skeptical? What's the purpose of making decisions quick on the fly?
Well, you want the purpose of making decisions quick on the fly is, let's say I'm driving on the highway and I don't know, and I've got a car in front of me and I haven't had a chance to look to see it on my right. If somebody's there, I might just maybe I haven't thoroughly vetted it, but I don't think anybody's there. I'm gonna move so I don't hit this guy in front of me.
Okay, right? So you don't want to hit the guy in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I have a reason to adjudicate the matter quickly, and respond. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the purpose, whether you're doing it quickly or slowly, is always going to be for the goal of salvation or certainty.
Well, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily quickly. It may be that I don't have, I need to make a decision, but I have plenty of time and I'm just not going to have enough data.
Yeah, well,
the
time factor has nothing to do with it. I'm saying everything that you do in your skepticism, you are searching for
true beliefs.
Survival. You're searching for survival, aren't you?
Well, I would tie survival to true beliefs, right? I want to have, in some cases, it's not a survival situation.
True beliefs.
And sometimes when I don't have an opportunity to be skeptical, it's not a life or death situation. It's that I have to spend some money on a monitor. I haven't had time to look into it, but my son really needs it. All right, I'm gonna go with my gut.
Yeah, but that's survival as well too. I mean, whatever you choose to eat, and when I talk about survival, I'm not just talking about existence. I'm talking about full existence. You're seeking pleasurable existence or salvation. Or in order to have salvation, you need to have certainty. The reason the scientific revolution took over is because we wanted to live a life that better corresponds to reality or get certainty. Now, I'm not saying we can attain absolute certainty, but I'm saying our goal is never skepticism. Skepticism is a little tool we use that we must use in order to gain salvation of existence.
Right. I would say if anyone's using skepticism as the goal, then they're using it wrong.
Right. But that's what it comes across as. And this is what skeptics like to say. They like to say, oh, we need to be skeptical, just like I say Greg Bray, inspiring doubt. If you really think about that, and that's not the goal. And I don't even think he realizes that. And a lot of the atheists do that kind of thing. They use that kind of language. They don't realize they're not trying to get doubt. They're trying to get certainty. That's why we do everything that we do.
I would say that I think that probably arises from the fact that oftentimes, and I agree with you that we all exercise faith. I was actually refreshed to hear you say that you can't be 100% certain, that you have this underlying apparatus that you're subject to, that you're taking in the world through, and there's some liability that comes to that being the case. And I would agree with that. So I wouldn't say that I have any when it comes to my core presuppositions, you and I are on the same foot in terms of
epistemology.
Yeah, in terms of epistemology, there's a faith aspect there. But there are things that there are beyond those core. I see those core beliefs as the tools of rationality, and that beyond those, where I can deliberate and expose myself to evidence and make predictive propositions that I can vet and see if the theory actually fleshes out the way that I think it is. Where I can do that, I should, and where I can't, if it's not impacting my core ability just to reason, which I think I need to move on throughout the world with, where I can take my time or where I can set aside provisionally. It's not something that I see as being a matter that I need to form an opinion on right now. Then I'm willing to say I don't know, or put that aside. And I think that there's a lot of people who aren't. And I think you've mentioned some of these people that have there's a zealousness for certainty beyond what they're really capable to speak to. I think atheists have that same. There's a lot of people who put forward science as proof, right? When it's not proof. And one of my favorite statements by Ozzy is that all theories are underdetermined by the evidence, right? I think that's the level of confidence we have. We have enough evidence to warrant belief, but we can never say that is the case. That is, we can never apply that type of certainty. And so I think that there are people abusing skepticism in terms of not articulating it as a disposition. But I think when Greg Brahe's talking about inspiring doubt, I see that as the same reaction to the type of things that you're talking about in terms of people lacking good grounds for kids. I think that's actually the point of that street epistemology that at least Anthony's practicing. I haven't read his book. I can't really speak to how he practices it. Anthony certainly, I think, at least in his probably last 20 or 30 that I've seen, he's out there trying to get people to think about what are the reasons that you actually believe this stuff, and do you have good grounds, and do you need to maybe go and find better reasons for why you think a thing. And I think that's the inspiring doubt aspect that actually resonates with me. I think to some degree we can afford to err on the side of doubt, because if anything, I think we tend to be more confident than we should be.
Well, my problem is with guys like Ozzy and professional philosophers and stuff. They say that we can't know anything, and they have this extreme agnosticism unless they're giving their own ideas. And it's like, come on, let's be consistent here. You act as if there's your view is very correct, but you cannot affirm anything if there's going to be absolute skepticism. And so from my perspective, it's not about doubt. Let's live consistently with what we say is true. This is what I'm challenging people to do. If you want to say we really can't know anything, then live that way and stop asking questions.
I think there are those individuals who extend themselves too far out while they're being critical of Christians and others for having done this for having done the same thing, right? And probably a lot of atheists would say all Christians are extending far beyond, right? They see that there's not warrant, or there's not reasons to believe certain propositions within the Christian faith. And so a lot of atheists will have problems with kind of the whole kit and caboodle, right? Which that's I don't really want to get into that, but in terms of someone like Ozzy, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I've seen him say, you realize your epistemological limits, and then you get on with the business of reasoning, right? And he says that all the time. We don't use our reasoning to justify our reasoning. That's not what it's there for. He has a ladder analogy. I don't use the ladder to get further up the ladder. So I'm going to admit that I have this core set that I can never be certain. But I think that when and I know in terms of your relationship with him and arguing, and wanting him to engage you, I don't want to speak to that in any way, but I would say that in the times where I've engaged with Ozzy, when pressed, I feel like he's providing the same reasons that you would want to provide for your propositions.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
And so it's not, his skepticism stops at the point of when he's reasoning, right? Or not. That's wrong. That's not the way I meant to say that. His uncertainty. He realizes that he's laying on a epistemological dilemma in terms of not being able to get absolute certainty.
Right. But
then he kind of gets on with that business, and he's willing to afford, or I'm willing to afford you and other Christians that same level of, I'm not going to question how it is that you know. I'm going to assume that you're evaluating things and you're coming to a level of certainty, a level of confidence, and we can move on from there, and we can evaluate how warranted your belief is, right?
Okay, well, I think I generally agree with that too. I guess it's just my attitude. The final of those who are philosophically oriented, the final attitude toward them is they don't really give any. They don't really. They almost leave you with your feet planted in midair. Whereas I see somebody who's a philosopher like R.C. Sproul. He makes unity out of diversity, and he makes a beautiful tapestry as he goes through the history of philosophy, and he gives a great end game and very satisfying towards certain. We can't have complete uncertainty, but we can have a knowledge. There is something that really is true, and there is reason for life. That's my goal for everything, and I think that's your goal too. But you guys, this is my problem, and this is what I'd like to continue on is. All right, so you know,
let me say one thing first to that, and then we can wrap up that side of the discussion. Is sure. You remember I said that when I went off to college, I had all of these beliefs that were they had no foundation. They weren't really the whatever pegs I had laid in the ground weren't very deep. Mm-hmm. And so the winds came along and my tent blew away, and I took on some whole other tent essentially. My worldview went bye-bye, and I adopted this other one, whole cloth. Mm-hmm. And it just, I feel like that speaks to how poorly reasoned, and like if somebody was to approach me now, I have a lot of really well-vetted beliefs that I'm pretty confident about, and I can give a lot of reasons why I'm confident in them. And it would be a lot of work to untie a lot of that, to just chuck the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so where was I going with that? So
I was saying philosophy doesn't lead anywhere really.
Right. So when atheism not being a worldview, mm-hmm. and being it's something that can dismantle a Christian worldview, right? If you come to the belief that no God exists, mm-hmm. atheism doesn't get you the rest of the answers. It's not like a religion where it's going to come in and go, okay, and here's how things are. You can go study this and it's going to tell you it all. So when I actually walked away from faith, I was like, well, I still want to have answers. I still want to know what's the case. Right. But actually I would argue I had the fact that I had to go to lots of different areas. I had to go into philosophy, I had to go to biology, I had to go into cosmology, I had to go into behavioral biology, understand the mind. How does the mind work? What are minds? Or morality, right? Like I had to go read books on understanding human behavior and why it is we have moral systems. That because I didn't believe in God, because of certain things that disagreed and didn't lead me to that anymore, to fill in all the things that I needed to replace took an inordinate amount of work, and that's a really tough thing. That is actually where I'm hesitant to say that I think maybe it's Greg or Hogtie or somebody takes the view that we shouldn't be necessarily replacing, like we shouldn't be hoping that religion is gone tomorrow, because there's a lot of work in building out a rational, coherent understanding of the world in a lot of different fields. And a lot of people, I don't think, are necessarily built to take that task on. I think there's a reason we have religion, and there's a reason why people, I think it's a quick and dirty way to get some solid ground between people. I don't think that's why people believe it, but I think that's how it functions. And so I'm a little, I don't want a world of atheists tomorrow. That world would scare me. I'm not sure that people are up to the challenge of really vetting their beliefs and actually coming to something that I could live with civilly with them, right? They might come to some really bad ideas, right? So,
well, that's my problem. And you said that, it's difficult for you to come to these ideas about morality and stuff. And this is my whole point, is that you can't. Atheism is a worldview denuder. That's all it is. It's a negative. All it can do is tear apart. It makes no positive affirmations. In fact, it cannot, because unless you have something metaphysically that can unify the diversities, it doesn't exist.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that entirely. Atheism does end up neutering worldviews and does not offer anything in its place. You're 100% right on that.
So it's not really a worldview. It's one half of a worldview. This is my theory. You affirm what is not, but you cannot, by definition, affirm what is.
Well, I disagree with that.
Metaphysically.
I would disagree with that. I would say that I then have my work cut out for me in forming my understanding and my beliefs in terms of what's true, what is the case. If I don't believe that God is the case, it doesn't scotch any notion of me now going out and actually trying to apprehend what is the case, right? I still actually have all that work to do. The fact that atheism doesn't bring that to me, that I'll admit, that's really tough. It's really
I'm saying,
hard.
not only saying it doesn't bring it to you, it also, so in other words, it's not positively giving you an answer. It is a fence to keep you from inquiry. That's the whole thing. That's my whole point. You cannot find it. Can we move on to the next point here? This is what I want to talk about.
Sure. What you just said that it prevents you from inquiry. What about it prevents inquiry?
Okay, well, let's talk about it. All right, so my whole problem with Peter Boghossian, and I'm chuckling through this whole conversation he sent in, and I wish I could reference him because I thought it was just quite humorous.
Just in all fairness, I was also like wincing every once in a while too. So I'm not I'm not going to defend him entirely.
Okay, well, he was speaking with very moral, imperative, descriptive terms. And I'm trying to think, he was constantly speaking with teleological language, and he says, we've got to help these people. Those religious people are bad, and they destroy the society. And my question to you, Bert, is why? Why is that a problem?
Well, I think I have an interest in people having true beliefs. I think
why?
That they're because it enables us to function together, to live together,
so humanity is special.
Well, it's special to me because I'm human.
Why?
Because I'm human.
It's always the petitio principii argument. You guys always do the same thing.
No. So I believe that I have certain biological imperatives that are wired into me. Right.
Where does it come from? Don't tell me evolution student.
Oh, no. I thought you were wondering where I got this argument from.
No. Where did these imperatives come from? In other words, you're speaking of teleology. You realize that purpose.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm all about teleology. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you have a value without a valuer?
You have certain things that are suitable for certain conditions, right?
Right.
So I'm suitable for surviving, having a family, having interactions with Trey Jadlow over the internet.
But I'm not talking about the fact that you're suitable for it. I'm saying you, Bert Poole, are a valuer. In other words, you act as if life is intrinsically special, but then when you're asked to give a justification for it, well, it's really not.
I have a biological imperative to survive. Right.
Okay, imperative means that something must be by command.
I see it as being something that's important, a priority for me.
Right, but objectively, is it important?
Yes, it is. For a being that has the traits that I have, my existence, that's the way it works, right? Values.
No, that's not the way it works. That's what you're special pleading.
No. Values are related to a telos, right? I'll agree with you on that.
Okay, so what is the telos then?
My telos is to survive and have kids.
Okay.
And to raise them to raise them to have kids.
Toward what end?
To raise them to have kids.
For no reason, right?
The reason is to have more kids.
Where did that reason come from?
So let me ask you this: what is an ant's reason for finding sugar in my kitchen?
Salvation.
Well, I think this is the part of the discussion that's going to get a little tough because I think those are loaded terms that you're introducing.
Okay, what word would you like that you don't like salvation? What would you say? Survival?
I have survival. Yeah, I have a survival imperative.
So the ant is programmed to exist, right?
Would you expect an ant or myself to have a imperative to not survive?
If in fact there's no such thing as value, objectively speaking, why would I?
Why wouldn't? All right, this is kind of going to get us into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's important in that if we go back, if we step through back, oh man, I really don't want to unpack evolution, but the way that I see it is if you take all right, so let me just unwrap, maybe unpack like 3 examples. So you have single-celled organisms that have no agency to speak of. They have a molecular engine or a quality about the way that the molecules, the way they're configured, that drives them towards, let's say, warm water. And the ones that function better towards that purpose have an interaction with electromagnetic radiation that breaks up, it ionizes electrons, and it breaks up and creates the mechanism for them having energy to create more of themselves, right? That chemical reaction causes a process that spawns a chain of events that leads to another single cell organism that comes about. You have other ones that maybe they're a little, because of the nature of the way that they were, or when they were produced by the prior cell, they had an ineffective mechanism for doing that. So those ones aren't going to propagate, right? So, but there's an imperative there. Even though it's not a conscious thing, there is a chemical interaction occurring that is causing a certain pattern to occur, such that individuals that are suitable to go towards the more warm water will produce more individuals who are going to be more likely to be good at going towards warm water, right? If you look at ants, ants have something like 200,000 brain cells or something. They don't know what a sugar molecule is. They don't have a cognizant brain the way that we do. When they leave, they are acting entirely on chemicals, on instinctual behaviors. And they know when I slap the table that they should panic. They panic. They're not thinking about it, but they have a response that causes them to shimmy all over the place. And somehow this has come about, that they have this reaction. But they know that if they encounter a sugar molecule, that's something they should bring back, however they do it. I'm not an insect guy, but roughly you kind of get what I'm saying. They're not employing agency. They have a certain
sure they employ agency.
Well, they're not cognizant.
It's a lower level of agency.
Yeah, they're not. It's in the same way that the water that the single-celled organism doesn't know it's moving towards warm water. It's just undergoing these processes. In the same way, I think the ant is undergoing a series of interactions that cause it to walk forward until it encounters this. They're incredibly complex, but not nearly as complex as myself having this conversation with you over Google Hangouts. I don't have any problem with seeing a pattern of development to the point where I am now, where my basic mechanisms are any different than the single-celled organism moving towards the warm water. I have certain things that about me, certain facts, biological facts about the way that I am, and those lead me to those are instilled in my both in my hardware and in the software that my parents gave me, which to some degree is derived by the hardware and software that they received, and you go back and back and back. That these imperatives make it such that I want to have more single-celled warm water favoring cells, right? Not literally, but that's the same progression. And so I have because of these biological facts, and I'm going to get into morality a little bit in here. Because of these biological facts, I have certain. I'm a social being. That's a fact about me. I have certain pro-social and antisocial behaviors, and morality, in my view, is the set of behaviors which so I'm a moral realist in that I have certain biological facts that lead to certain moral facts. So given a certain given what is the case, there's for me in any moment what ought to be the case in order to actualize the imperatives that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I don't have a it's a lot to lay out. It's a very complex thing than saying God is good. That's a very different way to come about morality. But I see it as no less tied to the physical reality and emerging from it, essentially.
Yeah, that's a point I want to focus on, emerging. So here you've got no value, you've got unintentionality, and at some point in that process, you have intentionality. Is that right? Somehow it just happens. Is that how you view it as being?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, you have no intentionality, unintentionality. Okay.
What would be this?
This you said a single-celled organism. I don't believe in common descent, but from your perspective,
sure,
you have a single-celled organism.
Well,
has no.
I would say that the single-celled organism's propensity for moving towards warm water is intentionality.
Oh, so it has intentionality. Okay. Is there ever a time when there wasn't intentionality?
Well, I think that
you got to go back somewhere.
Right. Well, I would.
Let's say before the single cell.
I would say intentionality is a way for me to talk about the reactions that are occurring, and the reactions.
Okay, but the choices you make are not just reactions because you're against murder, right?
No, I'm talking about the chemical reaction. So within a single-celled organism, it's exhibiting simple physical properties that are common throughout the universe in terms of how electromagnetic radiation interacts with atoms within molecules. Right.
So you're a determinist.
Oh yeah, I'm very much kept my Calvinist streak.
You're a hard. Well, I'm not a hard determinist. I'm a compatibilist, and Calvinists are compatibilists. But you're a hard determinist. There's no such thing as choice, right?
My favorite quote is Schopenhauer's. A man can will how he acts, but he cannot will what he wills. That's a compatibilist view that I can agree with.
Okay.
I see compatibilism as being I think it's still determinism.
It's soft determinism.
Well, I think it boils down to that.
So then it's not all chemical processes. Then you're saying that man has a choice.
I think man can deliberate.
Okay. Well, then you're not a determinist then.
Man, well, no, but I don't. It doesn't mean that I think he could do otherwise after you'd done it.
Well, you're not just saying it's chemical processes, and you're saying there's somebody who's making a choice in there that is determined, but there still is a choice, right?
No, I don't have a dualistic notion of like that. I do see it as physical. What I would say is that the
is there somebody controlling these choices, these processes? I don't understand.
No. I think a man can deliberate, but whatever he does is what he would have done.
Okay, then why do you punish somebody for making a wrong decision?
Because we want to deter future behavior. I don't know. I actually
thought about this much. You thought you have.
Huh? Oh, I think a lot of it. I was thinking of it back in Calvinism, so I think it's something I have a.
Yeah, but Calvinism has a body-soul duality. That's the problem, and you're denying that.
Right. Yeah. But I still see that. I don't think vengeance is just. So I think
that punishment though is just.
Punishment's just.
You have a sense of justice. You have no justification for it. You can't. It's not
possible. No. It's that I have a different definition of justice than you. For me,
no. If you have any sense of justice, it's going to be based in the sanctity of existence, and you cannot justify sanctity of existence.
Well, let me unpack this then, and then maybe you can at least understand where I'm coming from.
Okay.
So I see justice as being the necessary. It is a necessary. How can I put this? justice for me is a deterring consequence of unwanted behavior. So we
there's a wanted.
We don't want this type of behavior. We have to, there's I believe in a causal system, and part of the causal system is having deterrence. When I hear about an individual being punished harshly for something they committed, that is another causal quality in my matrix that impacts my behavior, right? So justice is functional in guiding societies and in terms of dissuading antisocial behavior and encouraging pro-social behavior, and that is all part of this causal soup. I believe
so purposeful.
Justice is purposeful. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, no. The justice you're describing is saying that justice is for the goal of the sanctity of existence or salvation.
I would say justice is for the supporting of the moral framework that a society has.
Right.
So it is
for salvation.
It is to prop it up.
For
I would
salvation.
say,
yes.
I would say for flourishing, or I would say
Yes.
for other bits. But I'm Aristotelian in terms of eudaimonia and the life well lived, and so I think justice serves that purpose. I don't see vengeance, however, or an attitude of vengeance or pride for that matter. For instance, I work at DreamWorks. I have a very prestigious job, but the difference between me and Trey Jadlow is I just simply wasn't Trey Jadlow. I wasn't born to your parents. I wasn't born in your circumstances. I don't have your skills. None of that is something that I initiated myself. Once I get in, I think I have certain things that I do that people reward and encourage, and that fosters more of that in me. But in terms of ultimate responsibility, I find I was on a murder trial like 4 years ago. I was a juror, and I look out at that woman growing up in central LA, having shot someone, and I hear the entire her entire background comes out in the trial, and we have to punish that crime as a deterrence. But I find compassion for her. She's not me. I want to actualize conditions where people like her don't grow up in those conditions. So I have a purpose. It's not a sit back determinism of, well, we'll just see what flows out. I have a certain motivation to change, people's situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're conceding everything I'm saying. I'm saying that you have a goal for salvation or the purpose of existence. But when you step back and say, does it really matter? You got to say no, because there's no teleology to it. There's no efficient cause to Darwinian evolution.
It matters to me, right? I have my own.
But that's just a just so story. You're not giving a reason. You're just saying it is this way because that's the way I am. That's not a reason. How does unintentionality intend intentionality before it exists?
I gave you an explanation as to why I have these imperatives, right? Why I have these desires.
No, you just gave me just so. You said I have these so that I can survive because it's.
Don't you remember there's the whole line of talking about how ants and single-celled organisms function towards.
Yes, but remember I said you have unintentionality, and then you have intentionality arising somehow. How does that happen?
Well,
but unintentionality give rise to intentionality.
Right, and I said that I don't agree with that separation. I'm willing to talk that.
So you're saying that intentionality has always existed?
No, I would say that intentionality is shorthand for me talking about the chemical.
So there is no intentionality.
There is if we want to have a conversation about my actions, right?
Which is important to you, right?
It's like free will, right? So I can have a conversation with somebody about free will because I know what they mean when they say that they made a choice.
Yes, right? But if the words have meaning,
right, exactly, and we mean different things by our words.
But we can come to a consensus and have a conversation, right?
Right, which is why I can kind of, okay, I understand what is the definitions and framework he's working under. I can take those on and understand his position, but disagree. You and I disagree about core principles within the Christian faith,
Sure.
The existence of God. But when you tell me about God and you tell me about how it motivates your actions, or how you feel about things, or how you feel when you pray, I can understand what you might be talking about there, even though I can disagree entirely with whether that's actually the case or not. Right.
But you can empathize with me that it's important if it leads toward existence, and you think that existence is important just like I do. Is that true?
Yeah, I think we both probably believe that existence is important.
Okay. Now, do you have a reason for that?
I gave you the whole causal story as to why I think that's the case.
So no reason. It just arose accidentally.
Well, no, I gave you a list of reasons. No, I don't think it grew accidentally. I think it's a case of things finding themselves suitable. So it's not that it arose accidentally.
So intentionality has always existed.
No. Well, no, now we're back into the definition of intentionality.
It's like you haven't answered.
Well, no, it's a, we're not going to be able to have that type of, we're not going to be able to take your understanding of intentionality and fit it into my worldview.
That's right, because you can't do it.
No. That's you not being charitable.
You're mean.
No. I didn't say that. When we do an internal critique, I step into your worldview and I adopt your terms and definitions, and I try to operate and I try to understand what you mean by them. And I would expect that were I to do an external critique, you would disagree on a whole lot of what I'd want to say or what I'd want to define in relation to your worldview, because I'm no longer operating with your given set of presuppositions and with all of that, right? And so it's the other way as well. If you want to talk about intentionality, you can step into my worldview and you can see what I mean by it, and I can give you within my set of presuppositions how I view it as a coherent thing. But as so long as you stand outside and try to force me down a path when we're not talking about the same thing, then we're just going to talk past each other, right? Right.
Well, the thing is though, but whenever you critique somebody else's paradigm, you step in their shoes. You have a set of presuppositions that you're employing in order to make the critique. Do you agree with that?
You can't shed them all, right?
That's right. So you've got to have some presuppositions you're foundational upon. But I'm saying in order to step into your shoes, I cannot make any sense because you have not given me an answer.
I think you would like to be able to shed as much as you can. You don't want to carry all that baggage in.
You've got to have the instruments of logic. You must have those.
Oh, sure.
You must have you must have sense perception. That's the two ones that we both got to have. Those are epistemologically indispensable. Sure. Now we make mistakes in our sensibilities, but you got to understand something that we've got to have those tools in order to make the inquiry, and we've got to have presupposition in order to have anything at all. And so using those two instruments, I've challenged you to give me an answer, and you haven't done it. You're saying, well, I can't understand it because you can't step in my shoes. We're stepping in the same shoes, bro.
No, I think that you're not adopting. You're not wholeheartily adopting. When you go like this and you go intentionality or not intentionality, that's
okay. Is intentionality always existed? Let's ask it again.
Not in the way you're talking about it.
Okay, in what way has it existed then?
Well, you have to understand, I see intentionality.
You're equivocating the term. You're saying intentionality means unintentionality and intentionality.
No, I think it's that intentionality is a term that we use to describe a complex orchestration of events. And I think those orchestrations have always occurred. It's today that I can have this conversation and talk to you about it. So I don't think that language has always occurred or that language has always been, right? But I think the things that the constituent operations that operate when we use language that allow it to exist have always been there. So the manifestation, the particular, Bert, for instance, Bert has not always been here, right? Bert is relatively new to the scene, but the constituent processes that make Bert, those are old hat. Those are
intentional.
No, those processes aren't intentional. No.
Oh, okay. So there was no intentionality then.
Prior to Bert, there was none of Bert's intentions. No.
No, any intention in the evolutionary process as you see it, there was a point when there was absolutely no intention.
Yeah, I think that's when I think I could probably give you that when the first cells, if we're going to call life reproducing, making copies, then if we define intentionality as action towards reproducing, then it coincided with whenever that occurred.
Okay, so it occurred.
Yeah, I think that cells, like at some point, molecules, whatever that looked like, were reproducing. But I would not say that, for instance, a crystal or a snowflake or something like that is undergoing chemical processes, and I wouldn't call that intentionality.
Exactly.
But I would. That was only because the replication process to me is different than. But I see it as much more of a continuum and a less of a hard line than what I think you would tend to see it as.
Okay, but all I'm asking you to do is justify how unintentionality can intend intentionality.
When molecules first, it's very difficult to talk about because I don't have
it's really hard. It's called the law of identity.
You missed the because part. So it's very difficult to talk about because I don't have a model of abiogenesis to somehow talk within. That's a no. See, when you say that's right, that's not the same that's right that I would say. It's right that I don't have it because I'm not privileged to that to those events.
Yeah, so you're special pleading.
No, I'm simply saying, wait, so are you a guy that's a fan of saying I don't know in terms of like being able to have areas where you go, look at, I have certain beliefs, but they kind of end at a point.
Okay, well, yes, I can, but here's the thing. If I'm a big fan of parsimony. If something is to be explained, you've got to have the simplest possible explanation. And if there's a simple explanation that is adequate, I cannot say I reject that simple explanation and I'm grabbing another one, but I don't know any of the properties of that other one. That's called special pleading.
Would you agree that there are complex explanations for things?
Absolutely.
Okay. And are there sometimes simpler explanations for those things which are wrong?
Indeed there are, yes.
Which are wrong. Sometimes the more complex explanations are right.
Yes, but they're justified. In other words, you can't just say they must.
I'm assuming both have some level of warrant. Right.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to go with the simplest one that explains the best.
I'll go with the simplest one that I think is right.
Right. That's what I just said. The simplest one that explains the best.
Sure. And I think your simple explanation is wrong. And I think my complex explanation is wrong.
You didn't give a complex. You just said, I don't know. I said it's irrational, and you didn't demonstrate how it is rational.
Well, I think I've laid out a lot of reasons.
Okay, listen, man, I need to get going here pretty soon. I've got a bunch of stuff.
I really enjoyed this conversation, Trey. So
good. Well, I'm glad to get to know you. I think we're going to be good friends here on a Google Plus and
yeah, you should dial back. You should dial back the snarkiness. Sometimes that I think more people would hang out with you if they. Oh
no, I don't think that's what it is at all. I think it's I think if you here's look at this.
Here's why I think that. I saw your conversation with Hogtie, and I saw your conversation with Sextus Empiricus, and I said Trey Jadlow is capable of having a conversation where he's not cackling. Tilting his head back.
You watch this video and watch that I cackled all through this video as well.
Did you really?
Yes.
I didn't see it.
No, and I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I just when something is funny, I'm just like, oh come on. I wear my sleeve, I'm who I am.
No, and I'm fine with it. I'm not trying to express my own frustration with it or anything. I'm saying that people might if you took a couple more words and when you choose to weigh in on something, and you could take this or leave it. Mm-hmm. If you're a little more charitable, you might get more people actually coming in and engaging and doing. You might actually woo the Aussies of the world, right? If you want to talk to Gary Edwards or Aussie, you're going to have to show that you're capable of having a little bit more charity, I think, than
Okay.
what comes across, than at least what comes across.
Okay, can you demonstrate? I want you to go through my videos. I want you to find one that I was uncharitable. Any of my hangouts. I don't believe I've ever been that. Here's the thing that I think it is. I think people, you got guys like Ozzy, and this is my problem. And I've talked to him about this in threads. He's engaged a little bit here and there, but he really won't do it. And you got Ozzy who looks at somebody like Sci-10 Atheist, who I consider to be somebody that not only should he not be encouraged, I think he should be shunned from the community because of the dark, wicked, dehumanizing humor that is. It's disgusting. And so Ozzy says that I'm too rude, that he can't, and then he'll turn right around and say, Sci-10 Atheist, that's real humor. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't seem to make too much sense to me. So when I got guys like that sit there and praise someone like Sci-10 Atheist and say, oh, Trey, he's too mean or he's too rude, I'm like, get a funny bone, grow a humorous, man. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I won't defend Ozzy. I will say that the last little bit here, if our whole conversation had gone such that I can't kind of walk you through my beliefs, where we get to the end of it, I try to do a little bit of work to lay some ground and try to get you to kind of give me a little bit, I know we're not going to agree, but here's how I see it. And then let's talk about how you see it. Okay. And I'll go for a walk with you. Sure. That the intentionality bit that we just talked about there was a little bit of that evidence. It was a little bit of, we're not on the same page in terms of terms, so let's try to get it to a point where you can at least understand how I'm seeing it. Right. I'm not looking for you to concede my point. I'm looking for you to understand how I'm seeing it. And you can see it as irrational at that point. But yeah. Anyway, I enjoyed it a lot. I really did. So
right. I'll just leave it at that. All right. So I'm sure we'll get together again soon, and look forward to interacting with you more. And thank you for doing this. Maybe I'll get Gavin guy. He'll come across and want to talk some more. But Gavin guy's a great guy too. Very good to speak with. My hangouts with him always been respectful. He's a very intelligent.
I had a hangout with him last weekend offline, and I told him that actually I was really I was surprised and actually really happy with the discourse you had with him in that hangout.
Yeah. No, we've always had very good discussions, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. So anyway, we'll get together again soon, and I wish all the best, and thanks for doing this with me, and greetings to your wife.
Have a good day, Trey.
Okay, man. All right, we'll see you.
Bye.